No one had ever gone to college in my family. My mother raised four kids on her own, two bedrooms in that little house. And football was my ticket out. I was the first one. And I had some great opportunities that I didn't even realize how lucky I was at the time. Public school, we didn't have any college counselors, anyone like that to advise me other than my coach. My choice came down between Michigan, sitting across the desk from Bo Schembechler, and Wake Forest. But the difference was Chuck Mills came to my mom's little house, ate her lasagna, spent the whole evening with us, and charmed the pants off my mom and me. And so I went to Wake. And if you have not been there, it's the smallest Division I school in America with just 5,000 students still. And something about that appealed to me because I was frightened. I didn't have confidence. I gained some. I was very young. I was 17 years old as a freshman, but I was a starter by the sixth game of that year. And then I moved to middle linebacker the next year, and then I was really coming into my own in my junior year when I suffered about the worst knee injury you can have. In one blow, I tore all four ligaments and severed my femoral artery, and my life was in danger. And then my leg was in danger, and then they put me back together again. And what was I going to do? What was I going to do then? I couldn't play anymore. But that little school and those coaches didn't let me go back home, and they helped me get going by becoming a coach. I became a coach for a while. And then one day, one of the assistant coaches while we were breaking down film said, "You know what? You can't do this. You got us all laughing. This isn't supposed to be your color commentary audition for TV." And they couldn't have been more right. I transitioned at that point into broadcasting. I've had 42 years in some big cities like my hometown, Philadelphia, New York, and Boston. And I've had a great career. And I owe it all to those years and indirectly to Chuck.
Well, I think that for me, it started the first day I saw him walk across the stage when he was being introduced as the new football coach at Utah State, and we didn't know who it was. We hadn't had any notice. They just called a meeting for the football team, and it was to meet our new coach. And uh, so there was a guy that came out and he actually brought a podium out and he was kind of moving around up there. I didn't know that was Chuck. I thought that was the janitor up there kind of getting things set up for the coach to come out. And I was, because Chuck did not kind of didn't have
No,
what when you think about a coach, this guy with a Bo Schembechler kind of a guy that's, with this big jaw
right.
sticking out there and all the muscles and everything. That was not Chuck Mills. Chuck Mills was a very unlikely looking head coach. And so those of us sitting there waiting for the coach to come out, we thought that was the janitor up there kind of getting things set up. And then all of a sudden he stepped to the podium and then he took over and he introduced himself. Well, that was our first introduction to him. And I got to know him really well. I mean, one of the things about Chuck, and I think Lou would definitely agree with this, is that he really took an interest in his players. He knew his players, and although he was not a saint, I mean, we need to I'd be the first one to tell you that
Right.
Chuck Mills was not a saint. He had a very sarcastic
Ooh,
side of him, and very his humor sometimes could get very dark, and he would offend a lot of people in some of the things that he would say, and he would tick off some of the athletes, and so he was a very unlikely football coach. I think one of the things that struck me about him was that he always tried to bring coaches around him who knew more about football than he did. He didn't pretend to be the expert on X's and O's. He had I think a master's degree in psychology. I mean, so if there was one thing that he did know how to do, it was to try to kind of connect with people and get inside their head a little bit and to try to bring the best out of them. But so we developed a friendship that went way beyond just a relationship between a coach and a player. And that only got stronger through the years, and even got stronger after I left Utah State and went into a professional career. And through the years after that, as he started the Brothers and Cousins
right.
organization to try to stay in touch with his players. Chuck really cared about his players, not just them, but also their families, their kids, their wives. I mean, he took a real interest in the players that he coached, and he took great satisfaction, I think, in seeing them go off into the world and have success. And but it was really interesting to me that so much of Chuck, a big part of him was he always carried this piece of him inside where he felt like he had done some of his players wrong. He had not. He said he told me one time that the toughest decision that a coach ever makes is trying to decide who gets to play and who doesn't. And he said, I think that he said, if I could go back and do it over again, I would do a lot of things differently. I didn't really understand, the impact that some of those decisions were going to have on players for the rest of their lives. And I think that Lou would probably agree with me on that this was one of the things that he carried with him for the rest of his life. The fact that he wished he would have had the opportunity to go back and do it over. And he felt like he needed to be constantly apologizing to his players for not getting it right, for not figuring out how to get all of his players more playing time. But I think he was a tremendously caring individual, and someone who has had a profound impact on so many people through the course of his life, and obviously starting this relationship between Japan and the U.S., which was a very big deal.
I should add, when I made the decision to come to Wake, one of the really big inducements, and this I'm reminded now, was that he had set up our trip to play 2 games in Japan in my freshman year. And again, if you can picture this kid from the Rocky movie going from there to a flight to Tokyo, and then playing on national TV in the Olympic Stadium in Tokyo, and spending 3 weeks in these gorgeous hotels and being feted by the government and by the players, and then living in the players' homes for 2 weeks. It was such an exposure. Everything that college should be all about for me. It opened my eyes. I started to dream. And then my experience in fact, Tom Asumi, who I think is virtually the commissioner of Japan football, he was the first coach to come back to live with us in the dorms at Wake in my sophomore year, and he stayed with us for 2 years. He lived in the dorms with us, and we learned a little bit about Japanese language and his ways, and he learned about our ways, and he remains one of my very good and supportive Facebook friends. I saw him at homecoming at Wake a couple of years ago. I mean, it's remarkable when you look back on these kinds of connections. And how about this? A couple of years ago, I was involved with Ron Jaworski and Dick Vermeil, 2 of my former broadcast partners, to try and start an indoor professional football league in China. Okay, tough duty for me. I was handling everything from the media to the coaching of the college kids, all the things that I'd done in my life. Who finds out about this and writes me and says, I can help, but Chuck Mills, because of his experience in doing everything that I just said in Japan. And it all translated almost perfectly to the culture of China and where they were in proportion to where Japan was in football at the time. And so I flew to Honolulu, and he put me in touch with Russ Francis, who had experience over there as well. And they gave me all their materials and all their curriculum. And here I was at 60 years old, going back to my old coach to help me get started in a new business venture. Well, we were playing Japanese All-Stars from their colleges in their very, very new program. I think maybe 4 or 5 years at most had they been playing. And they were much smaller. But boy, were they tigers. It was like when we would play Navy or Army, the service academies. And Coach would always tell us, remember with these guys, Saturday, game day, is the easiest day of the week for them. And that's what the Japanese players were like. They I'm down in South Carolina where we have these no-see-ums, these gnats, and you just can't get. That's what I remember about all the blockers coming at me in Japan. They were all down around my ankles. I was like, get away! But they were great, had great spirit. And then we would party with them and go to their homes after the 2 games that we played there, and we would watch the replays on national TV. And what a thrill for them, for us, to hear my name spoken in Japanese, and the exposure that we had to government welcoming parties and such. I'll tell you one story. The first ever banquet they had for us, coat and tie, all the players were there, all their families, all the government officials, we players. There were about 50 of us, not more. Some of us had to go both ways on that trip. And they had all this wonderful traditional honorary Japanese food set out that we had never heard of before, called sushi and sashimi. And our first question was, well, how do you cook it? And they said, we don't. And and you can imagine the faces on a bunch of city. A lot of our guys, we had 25 guys on the team from Philadelphia. You can imagine the faces on us. We're used to cheesesteaks. And we're like, you don't cook the fish. So we're trying to be polite, and we did drink their beer. And we didn't even notice the bunch of the Japanese players slipped out of the room. And all of a sudden, there was this commotion at the main door, and there were like 10 of the players holding bags and buckets full of and announcing, guess what we got? Kentucky chicken for Americans. That's
Yeah.
how it happened. And we went crazy, and that bonded us.
I think the brothers and cousins group has been really special for me to be able to get to meet some class guys all over the country, and we all share. There are things that we share as an athlete. It's the closest thing I can think of to going to war and
Yeah.
fighting in the trenches, and the experiences that we share are common to all of us. So when you meet somebody that has been through what we've been through, you have this common bond of experience, which there's an instant friendship because we're part of this brotherhood, because we all have gone through it. And the highs and the lows. Lou, you talked about injuries. I've had more than my share of injuries myself, and had to deal with that and overcoming them. And to me, it's about that. About trying to be the best that we can be and not let anything get in our way. And I think that that's why sports, and football in particular, is so valuable to young people, because of the lessons that it teaches us about perseverance and goal setting, and getting knocked on your ass and not staying there. Get up and keep going. This is what it's all about. And so I love the fact that I've got brothers and cousins that they know we all went through the same thing. So when we get together, the stories and the memories, it's something that's really, really special, and it's just not duplicated anywhere else in my life.
Yeah, I think for these players, cherish the moment. Not only your careers and your everyday games, but your practices, your times together in the dorm, and especially this unique opportunity to reach across the Pacific Ocean, which wasn't even possible 55, 65 years ago. And stay connected with these people. Stay connected with your teammates and with your competitors. It'll become a lifetime of a friendship, of a fraternity that no one else can be admitted to. It's very special, and it means everything to me at this point in my life. My best friends in my life to this day are the people that I played with at Wake Forest, and the people that I've come in contact in football and in sports throughout my life as a result. So cherish it and hold on to it.
I think that if Coach Mills were here, I think one of the things that he would want to say to young people out there, not just athletes, but all of them, is that the pursuit of excellence should not be an option. We all have choices about what we can do in our lives, but I think that Coach Mills would want to challenge all of us to pursue excellence, in our lives, to make a decision about what we want to do, and then to focus on being the very best version of ourselves, to be the very best that we can possibly be, and whatever that is. It doesn't mean that everyone has to be all world in whatever they do, but being the best that they can be, I think, is what Coach Mills would want people to hear from him. So I don't know, that to me is what I would think he would want to say.